We're back at High Impact Motorsports taking apart the old Z22 engine, and that's going to be a fun one. This is my white Datsun 720, and I'm getting the engine installed today. This is the Z22. This is a Z22 that I've bored out with Z24 pistons, and it's going to be about 2.3 liters, so it ought to be a pretty good engine. What it's replacing is a Z22 engine that I built back, back in 2021 during COVID, and it was running fine, and then it just started consuming oil like crazy, and we're gonna do an autopsy to find out why. So the engine got to a point where it was consuming so much oil that it was very difficult to justify driving it daily. It was consuming about a quart of oil every 100 to 150 miles. The first quart would always go very quickly. The second quart would take a little longer to go. I really didn't like driving into that second quart because, of course, then you leave only 2 quarts in the oil pan, and so you'd check the oil, and man, it was almost always, when checked, down on the low mark on the dipstick. And so once the oil consumption became a problem, the oil changes became slightly less frequent because we were just struggling to keep oil in the engine at that point. So yes, the inside of the engine does look really bad from a black oil standpoint. So yeah, here she is. I mean, it's pretty dirty. It's pretty black under the oil residuals that are in there are pretty black. I'm not proud of that. So initial observations, port number 1 on the exhaust is pretty sooty, really sooty. Port number 2 and number 3, the valves are white. And number 4 is sooty, just like number 1. Kind of a different story over here on the intake. It looks like that valve's pretty wet on intake number 4. Intake 3 is pretty dry. Intake where are we at? Yeah, intake 3 looks like intake 3 has a weird spread on the valve, like maybe oil was dripping down the valve. And then intake, there's a little bit of wetness in all of them. So yeah, with all the oil present on the valves, it's interesting enough. I wonder if there isn't a valve issue, like a valve guide or something like that. I want to see what the rings and bottom end of the engine look like. Very curious now. Alright, so I've got this engine tore down to a point to where I get the timing cover off. I'm in the number 2 dowel on the cam gear. That's actually correct for a nap Z, so that's why I timed it. And if I follow the chain down, that's pointing up. There is a little bit of stretch that this aftermarket timing chain ended up having, because this isn't flush with this either, and that's only after about 40,000 miles. So not bad, but still not ideal. Alright, so we got the cylinder head off. Let's take a look at the cylinder head first. This tells a pretty good story. Look at the oil on that cylinder. That guy's pretty dry. That guy's fairly dry. And that guy's, got a little bit of oil in him. If you look at the head gasket, though, this is what's intriguing me. This is a factory OE head gasket. And if you look there, there's some damage to the head gasket on cylinder 3. And if you look at the cylinder head, 3 also is cleaner than the rest. Now let's go over to the cylinders and see what they look like. So cylinder 3, has scoring on the cylinder wall. And then if we go to cylinder, this is cylinder 2, and 2 looks ideal. Like, there's some scoring. That's some scoring there, but not much. On the walls, you can see the hone marks all the way up. Let's rotate this engine, and let's get cylinders 2 and 3 up on the bore. Okay, and then cylinder 1 has a pretty solid scuff, and then cylinder 4, pretty much all our honing marks are gone. So let's get the pistons out, see what they do. Alright, the pistons are now out. We've got them 1, 2, 3, 4. Pistons number 1 and 4, believe it or not, the oil rings are sucked in. And they are not, there wasn't any, the oil rings were just not, they didn't even want to touch the walls. Another interesting find is that piston 3 had a broken ring. So that ring was riding like that. Yeah. And then of course we've got cylinder 2 right here. These 2 pistons came out normal, like they had some resistance coming out. Pistons 1 and 2, they were easy to come out. But then if you look at the skirt, there's a little scuff mark right there. But mostly normal. Mostly okay. Those rings, that being said, the other part of it is I didn't bother to do a piston to wall clearance when I put this engine together. I also don't remember doing ring gap. And of course this is one of those things where I trusted that the machine shop got everything right. And it was also during COVID. And so if you consider those factors, there's a strong possibility that it wasn't machined right to begin with during COVID, or that the pistons, they had struggled to get them, if I remember correctly. They struggled to find the piston rings. It was at a period of time of scarcity. So the question is, and they're cast rings, so the question I have to continue to ask myself is, did this fail because it's out of spec when it went together, or the parts themselves were failed? And of course I was doing this on the cheap, so that's another thing to consider. Anyway, hope you enjoy this video. What do you think I should do next with this engine? Should I do what I just did to my other engine that I just put out in the white truck, which I just put a 2.3 liter engine together? Should I bore it out to a KA24 spec? And should I put KA pistons in it? What should I do? Let me know in the comments, and we'll see what we do.